In this video I will share some clips I filmed recently so you can decide for yourself how much of a difference stabilizer makes for videos. So first clip is iPhone with no stabilization. You can turn it off in Movie Pro app. This is the result that you will get basically on phones that don't have optical image stabilization. Next one is standard stabilization. This is just a standard optical stabilization in iPhone 6s Plus. Next one is the feature of iPhones. It's a cinematic stabilization. I think it also applies additionally to the optical stabilization, electronic one, and kind of smooths things a bit more. Actually works pretty good. And the same clip is at 1080 60 frames per second. Just for comparison, actually not much difference from 25 frames per second. And now 60 FPS slowed down to 42%, which is essentially played at like 25 frames per second. Probably cinematic stabilization will give you the best results if you're on iPhone. However, it's an iPhone feature, so not all the phone will have it. Again, just for comparison, standard stabilization in 4K works similar to just a standard stabilization at 1080p. You can't get 4K cinematic stabilization, at least not on 6s Plus. Then for comparison, iPhone 6s Plus on a gimbal with no stabilization. So this is basically if you'll use like a regular phone just on a gimbal. Then gimbal and standard stabilization. Again, most of the phones that have optical image stabilization, this is gonna be standard stabilization. The best results that you can get is on a gimbal and cinematic stabilization by far. And just for comparison, cinematic stabilization at 60 frames per second slowed down to 42%, which is essentially translates to playback speed at 25 frames per second, as this project is being exported at 25 frames per second. The next again is just for comparison's sake, standard stabilization in 4K. Not the best results, just regular. Better than no gimbal though. And now let's compare them kinda side by side. You can clearly see that no stabilization sucks. Going to standard is already better. Standard is optical image stabilization on an iPhone, just regular one. Going to cinematic is even better. It actually produces pretty amazing results, to be honest. But if you don't have optical image stabilization or you don't use iPhone, so like cinematic stabilization is not available for you, buying a gimbal is actually a pretty good choice. It will improve your results quite significantly. You can see that going from no stabilization to gimbal and no stabilization, there is actually a pretty significant difference. Okay, now let's compare them side by side. The gimbal I used for this test was Zhiyun Smooth-C. I'll put a link in the description. These are basically 4 main options that someone will have. Having no stabilization at all. For videos, really bad. Going from no stabilization at all to putting your phone on a gimbal improves videos quite dramatically. Then, if your phone has optical image stabilization, putting it on a gimbal and turning it on optical stabilization helps tremendously. If we're comparing just cinematic stabilization in the iPhone, it's good, it's really good results. If you don't have any other options, this is the best one that you can get. But putting it on a gimbal, it shines, really. Gimbal and cinematic stabilization really helps you get great shots. Gimbal cinematic stabilization and adding auto stabilization in Final Cut Pro, you can really make some smooth dolly shots with these tools. And now I just want to compare them side by side. Cinematic stabilization and gimbal and cinematic stabilization. You can clearly see how much iPhone bounces kind of around and wobbles on the cinematic version. Don't get me wrong, it's much better than nothing at all, but going just from cinematic to gimbal and cinematic is like night and day difference. But as you can see, no stabilization at all, and gimbal and stabilization really helps. And so if you have some phone that does not have optical image stabilization built in and you want to create some home videos, maybe your kids videos, whatever it may be, you can grab some pretty inexpensive gimbals and it will improve your shots quite significantly. Thanks for watching, guys, and take care.